The next one, impaired limits. This is where there's a deficiency in internal limits. In other words, there are no limits set. No limits are consistently enforced. So everything's always up for, grabs. No real long-term goal orientation. So think of the child that's born into an ag family. In order to be responsible for others, to set goals and move towards them, to have a long-term goal orientation, that's all frontal lobe stuff, all executive functioning. If you're born into a family that's highly dysregulated, you're going to have some challenges with that. And when people ask you to do those kinds of things, it's going to feel pretty abnormal for you. It's not going to feel right somehow. Leads to difficulty respecting the rights of other people, cooperating with others, making commitments, or setting and meeting realistic personal goals. This is also, if you look at any diagnosis of narcissism or antisocial behavior, this element is in there. There's a certain amount of grandiosity. I find sometimes that we mislabel people that have bipolar disorders. And if this is the dynamic they came out of, you're going to see this kind of inconsistency in the way that they respond. And we're going to see unstable, serialized relationships. Quick in, quick out. Quick in, quick out. Quick in, quick out. Or maybe quick in and quick out, meaning that they may actually have multiple concurrent unstable relationships. Not that any of you have ever had somebody in your life that's like that. And low levels of accountability to the relationship. It's really all about them and not about the relationship. Does that make sense to folks? Number 4, families that tend to be other-directed, where they have an excessive focus on the desires, feelings of others, where they give up kind of their own needs for the benefit of others. Now, this is particularly damaging with children, but you see it in a lot of different dysfunctions. One of the stories I like to use that's related to this, and some of you have heard this before, I apologize for your having heard it before. You're going to get to hear it again, because it's so illustrative. We had a 13-year-old that was sent to us because she was suicidal. She'd been in counseling several times before, and people just felt like she was depressed. And what we began to look, when we did a more thorough assessment, we found this is a 13-year-old that for 4 years has been the adult in her family. When I say that, she balanced the checkbook. She made sure the groceries were purchased. She made sure the house was clean. She made sure that her 3 younger siblings did their homework and got to school on time. She packed their lunches. She got them to their doctor's appointments. You kind of getting a feel for this? So she was so other-directed on meeting the needs of her parents and siblings that she wasn't meeting any of her own needs. Now, how can you not be depressed when that's happening? And then, of course, the parents were mad when she would boss them around. No, you cannot spend money on that video game. Wow. But it's my money. I can spend it however I want. Well, if you do, we won't have food. They would have these kind of discussions, and they would be mad at her. But she was tenacious. She wouldn't give in. Because if she did, the whole thing would fall apart. But she didn't have any girlfriends. She hadn't ever been to the mall and just shopped or window shopped. You understand? This dynamic is really kind of icky. That's my clinical term for it, icky. In this kind of dynamic, the persons raised in it always have to earn love. There's always a price tag attached. It's not a sharing. It's not an interdependence. It is, I have to perform in ways to take care of you so you will give me the love that I need. And there's always this fear, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Particularly if I don't sense I'm getting the love that I want or need. Now what can I do? Now, in addiction terms, we sometimes mislabel this as being codependent. And that's really unfortunate that we label it like that. Because really it's this other-directedness. It's when all emotional qualities have a price tag. And I am willing to pay the price in hopes that I get that I most need, acceptance, love, and connection. It's really kind of vile. Number 5, over-vigilance and inhibition. Now this is when you talked about those overly rigid families, this is the overly rigid family. This is, generally we find these in several categories. Military families, law enforcement families, and families that have fundamentally restrictive religious beliefs. Now, this is not a beating up on any religion. When you have zealots or fanatics in anything, it sets the stage for this one. Okay? An excessive emphasis on suppressing your spontaneous feelings, impulses, and choices, because your job is to make the most powerful members of this family look good. So if you're a child in a military family, you better be making your parent look good. If you're a minister's kid, you better be making your parents look good. If your dad's a cop, you better not be getting in trouble. Can you feel those messages? There's also generally a lot of rigid externalized rules that are all about being seen as one thing rather than actually being that thing. And usually I call it the grim family, because it's not generally a fun place to be. It's kind of grim, unpleasant, punitive in nature, a lot of rules, a lot of expectation and demands, where the focus is more on being right, being seen correctly than you being happy. We are more focused on being seen as appropriate rather than having relationships. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. These are the 5 dynamics that generate a lot of dysregulation. Are any of them surprising to you? Does it seem kind of intuitive to you that these would be really tough family dynamics? The problem isn't that they just occur. The problem is they tend to be intergenerational. So they don't just happen with, you just didn't wake up one morning if you're a parent and say, I want to have that kind of family. You generally are in the inheritor, the card carrier of that dynamic, and you're just being faithful and reproducing it in your own family with your own kind of flavor, but you're still faithful to it. This becomes problematic.